bank's lawyer slid the paper across the table like it was supposed to end everything. "Mr. Lawson," he said, almost smiling, "this is our final offer." Ben Lawson looked down at the number. Then he folded the paper once. Neatly, carefully, like a receipt he didn't plan to keep, and pushed it back. No. That one word hung in the room longer than anyone expected. Because outside that conference room, there were architects waiting. Contractors waiting. Permits expiring. Investors calling every hour. And a $30 million development project that had just stopped breathing. All because of one narrow, ugly piece of land a bank had laughed at 4 years earlier. A piece of land Ben bought for $8,000. $8,000. That was it. Not $8 million. Not $80,000. 8. And at the time, the room had literally laughed. So how does a man in scuffed boots, with an old pickup truck and a savings account that barely crossed 5 figures, end up freezing a project worth $30 million? That part didn't happen all at once. It started with paper. It usually does. Ben Lawson was 43 when all this happened. Not flashy. Not angry looking. Not the kind of man people notice first. He drove a faded silver Tacoma with one speaker that rattled on right turns. He drank gas station coffee too hot and too fast. He had this habit of flattening paperwork with the side of his hand before he read it, like the truth might hide in a wrinkle. Most people in Marin Falls knew him as the guy who fixed commercial HVAC units. If a pharmacy's air went out in July, Ben showed up. If a diner's freezer started coughing warm air at 2 a.m, Ben showed up. He was reliable in the most invisible way a person can be. The kind of man cities run on and almost nobody thinks. But Ben had another habit. When he finished jobs, he stayed up late, reading county maps, parcel records, old plats, zoning changes, drainage plans. Not because he was a developer. Not because he dreamed of empire. Because he'd learned, years earlier, that land wasn't always about what people could see. Sometimes it was about what they assumed. And assumptions are expensive. That lesson came from his father. Not in some dramatic speech. Not over a deathbed. Just in pieces. Ben's father, Ray Lawson, had owned a bait and tackle shop near the river, back when Marin Falls still had factory money in its bloodstream. Nothing fancy. Worms in fridges. Coffee in a stained metal pot. A bell over the door that never sounded the same twice. Then a road widening project came through. Promises were made. Paperwork changed. A refinancing deal with Commonwealth Union Bank turned into fees, delays, and one ugly winter when Ray missed 2 payments after a flood damaged the shop. The bank moved quickly. Faster than they'd spoken. Faster than they'd promised. Ben was 24 when he watched his father carry the last 2 tackle boxes out of a store that had been in the family for 19 years. Ray didn't cry. That somehow made it worse. He just looked at the building for a long time and said, "Never trust a handshake over a document." That sentence stayed with Ben. Years later, his father was gone. The shop was gone. The river still ran past the empty lot, like nothing had happened. And Commonwealth Union Bank had merged, expanded, changed logos, polished its image, and become the kind of institution that sponsored charity breakfasts while foreclosing on people in the same zip code. Ben never forgot. He just didn't talk about it. That's why on a gray Thursday morning, he walked into the county tax auction with a folded plat map in his jacket pocket and $8,200 in his checking account. The auction room was exactly what you'd expect. Weak coffee, bad fluorescent lights, metal chairs that made everybody sit with a little more resentment, a few local investors, 2 real estate attorneys, a couple of men in quarter zips pretending they weren't there on behalf of bigger money, and one woman from Commonwealth Commercial Division sitting near the front with a yellow legal pad and a look that said she already knew how the day would end. The parcel list wasn't glamorous. Foreclosed duplexes, vacant lots, a condemned laundromat, bits of land nobody wanted. Then parcel 17B came up, 14 feet wide at one end, 22 at the other. A crooked strip of cracked asphalt, weeds, and drainage rock squeezed between the old Bartlett Mill property and Ransom Street. Just under 1/5 of an acre. Landlocked according to one man in the back. Useless according to another. The auctioneer read the legal description like he was trying not to laugh at it himself. Opening bid, $5,000. Nobody moved. $5,000, do I hear 5? Silence. The woman from Commonwealth glanced once at the page and didn't lift her pen. The auctioneer dropped it. $3,000. Nothing. Ben looked down at his plat map. Then back up. 3. A few heads turned. The first thing people do when someone bids on something ridiculous is check whether it's a joke. The auctioneer nodded. I have 3,000. A local landlord smirked and raised to 4. Ben went to 5. The landlord shrugged, mostly for entertainment, and went 6. Ben said 8. Just like that. No pause. No drama. $8,000 for a sliver of broken ground nobody wanted. The room changed. Not into shock. Into amusement. One of the lawyers actually leaned back and laughed through his nose. The Commonwealth rep turned and looked at Ben for the first time. Not with concern. With that bright little expression people wear when they think they've just met a fool. 8,000, the auctioneer said. Any advance? Nothing. Going once. Still nothing. Going twice. The gavel came down, and from near the front, a man in a Navy suit. Later, Ben would learn he was outside counsel for Commonwealth's real estate arm, said, just loud enough for the room, congratulations, you just bought yourself a very expensive weed patch. A few people laughed. Not hard, but enough. Ben didn't answer. He signed the paperwork, flattened the pages with the side of his hand, and left. What nobody in that room knew was that Ben hadn't bought the parcel because of what was on it. He bought it because of what touched it. That distinction is where the whole story lives. But Ben didn't explain that. Not then. For a while, nothing happened. And that made the whole thing look even dumber. Ben paid the taxes. Had the brush cut back once. Put up a plain metal sign that read private property. No trespassing. People drove by and saw exactly what the auction room had seen. A narrow strip of nothing. A mistake with weeds on it. Even Ben's sister Claire asked him one Sunday over microwave lasagna, "You're sure this isn't one of those things you'll laugh about in 10 years? Ben shrugged. Maybe. That was another thing about him. He didn't oversell. He didn't pitch. He let people underestimate him because correcting them took energy and he preferred saving it. Then, 11 months later, The old Bartlett Mill site sold. Not publicly at first. An LLC bought it. Then another holding company appeared. Then city agenda minutes mentioned a redevelopment proposal. And suddenly, Marine Falls had renderings. Glass frontage. Retail on the first floor. Office space above. A parking deck. Landscaping. A polished sign out front with the name Commonwealth Square. $30 million. Backed by Commonwealth Union Bank and private partners. Local news loved it. Revitalization. Jobs. New chapter. And on the pretty color renderings, there it was. The main entrance road. Coming in from Ransom Street. Crossing directly over Parcel 17B. Ben looked at the image for a long time. Then he reached into a drawer, pulled out the folded plat map, and opened it again. Still there. Still exactly where he remembered. Still the only legal frontage point connecting the rear track to the street under the old subdivision line. The larger mill property had width. A lot of it, but not where it counted. The part touching the public road wasn't clean. One section had been vacated decades earlier. Another had utility restrictions. And the route the bank's planners wanted to use, the cleanest route, the cheapest route, the one their whole traffic design depended on, crossed Ben's land. Not just for cars. For stormwater. Utilities. Emergency access. Everything. Without that strip, the site could still maybe be developed. Maybe. But not with the current plan. Not quickly. Not cheaply. And in real estate, quickly and cheaply are often the entire plan. Ben didn't call anyone. He didn't celebrate. He changed the air filter at a dentist's office that afternoon, went home, heated leftover chili, and waited. The first letter arrived 12 days later. Professional. Warm. A standard acquisition inquiry from a project consultant. They understood he owned a small parcel adjacent to the proposed redevelopment and would like to discuss a mutually beneficial purchase. They offered $25,000. Ben read it twice, then placed it under a salt shaker on his kitchen table and kept eating. The second letter came by certified mail. $35,000. The third came with a business card and a sentence in bold about timelines. Then came the phone call. Mr. Lawson, this is Dana Pierce with Pierce Land Solutions. We represent the development group for the Bartlett redevelopment. I think there may have been a misunderstanding about the value of your parcel. Ben smiled a little at that. A misunderstanding on whose part? There was a pause. Your parcel, she said, choosing her words carefully, has limited independent utility. Ben looked out his kitchen window at the strip of gravel beside his shed. Seems like it has some utility. Another pause. Would you consider $60,000? Ben asked. Is that what it's worth to you? That's a generous offer. That wasn't my question. You could hear the tone shift on the line. Not anger. Annoyance wearing professional shoes. We're hoping to avoid unnecessary delay. Ben said, then you should probably redesign around it. And hung up. Now, if this were the kind of story where the little guy turns ruthless overnight, that's where the music would swell. But real life is slower than that. More paperwork. More silence. More people pretending they're not worried until the cost of pretending gets too high. The bank's project team kept moving as if Ben would fold. They filed preliminary concepts, met with traffic engineers, held smiling public presentations with foam boards and catered sandwiches. Then a civil engineer requested access to Ben's parcel for survey verification. Ben said no. 2 weeks later, orange stakes appeared anyway. Ben pulled them out and laid them in a pile by the road. Then he got a sterner letter. This one came from a law firm. It mentioned cooperation, project value, community benefit. It did not mention the fact that somebody had trespassed. Ben took pictures, saved everything, and kept waiting. At the first planning review, the city engineer asked a question nobody from Commonwealth wanted asked on camera. Do you control access across parcel 17B? The project architect answered too fast. We are in active discussions. That's professional language for no. The engineer nodded slowly. And the storm line? Also under discussion. The room got quieter. Because when experts go vague, everybody hears it. A council member leaned forward. So if those discussions fail, what happens? The architect looked to the bank's development director. He smiled the tight smile of a man trying to look unworried in public. We're confident it will be resolved. That sounded fine. Until the next meeting. And the next. Because confidence is not the same thing as control. And paper is not moved by confidence. By then, the offers were rising. 90,000. Then 125. Then 200. Not directly from the bank anymore. Always through representatives. Always with some version of the same idea. This is more money than the parcel is worth. Ben knew that. Of course he knew that. They kept talking as if he didn't. That was their mistake. They were valuing the dirt. He was valuing the choke point. And there's a difference so large it can break schedules. Around this time, people started talking. Small town, big project, weird delay. That combination always grows legs. Some said Ben was greedy. Some said he was a genius. Some said he'd stumbled into luck. That last part was only half true. Luck mattered. But luck usually needs somebody prepared enough to recognize it. Ben had recognized it because years earlier, on a service call at a title company, he'd overheard two attorneys arguing about frontage. One lot had acreage. The other had 11 feet of road access. The 11 feet won. That idea lodged in his head. Then, when the Bartlett parcel started showing up in county records, he checked the plat. Then he checked old road dedication maps. Then stormwater overlays. Then utility corridors. 3 nights in a row at his kitchen table with a yellow highlighter and a lamp that buzzed when it got hot. That was the hidden part. Not brilliance. Patience. Boring, stubborn patience. The kind that looks like nothing until the day it looks like everything. The bank, meanwhile, started bleeding in places the public couldn't see. Environmental consultants billed by the week. Lenders wanted updates. Construction pricing had expiration windows. One subcontractor reportedly moved to another project. Then interest rates shifted. Then steel prices moved. Delay wasn't just embarrassing now. It was expensive. Very expensive. So the tone changed. The next meeting wasn't with a cheerful land consultant. It was with 2 attorneys and a man named Warren Keel, Senior Vice President of Development Lending for Commonwealth. Warren was polished in that expensive way that tries to pass for relaxed. He met Ben in a private room at the bank's downtown branch. Mahogany table. Cold water in glass bottles. A framed photo of the building they wanted to construct, sitting on an easel like a threat disguised as progress. Warren opened with a smile. Ben, right? Ben nodded. Mr. Lawson, said one of the attorneys, correcting the room back into hierarchy. Warren went on anyway. We'd like to solve this like reasonable people. Ben said, that sounds good. Warren slid a folder across. Inside was an offer for $300,000. For a parcel Ben had bought for $8. $300,000 would change most people's year. Maybe their life. It did not change Ben's face. Warren watched him read. Then added, that is far beyond any appraised land value. Ben closed the folder. Then why are you offering it? Nobody answered immediately. So Ben answered for them. Because your whole site plan runs through my frontage. One attorney shifted in his chair. Warren kept the smile, but lost the warmth. The project can proceed through alternate configurations. Then do that. It would be inefficient. Ben looked at him. Sounds expensive. That was the first moment Warren understood he wasn't across from a lucky mechanic. He was across from someone who knew exactly where the leverage was. And that changed everything. The bank explored every pressure point they had. Could the city condemn the land? Not for private development. Could they force an easement through necessity? Not likely. Historic parceling weakened that argument, and necessity isn't easy to prove when you bought the problem after it was already visible in the record. Could they redesign? Yes. If they were willing to lose parking count, shift the utility run, renegotiate traffic access, and spend millions more on retaining walls and drainage revisions. In other words, yes, in the same way a man can swim home in a storm. Possible. Not attractive. Meanwhile, Ben did something that made them even angrier. He hired his own land use attorney. Not a shark. An older woman named Patricia Wynn, who had a voice so calm it made aggressive people sound childish around her. At the first joint call, one of Commonwealth's lawyers said, "Let's be realistic about value." Patricia answered, "That's exactly what my client is doing." Then she went silent. It was brutal. Silence can embarrass the wrong person faster than shouting. The bank increased the offer to $500,000. Then $650. Then $700. With language about immediate close and confidentiality. Ben still didn't say yes. Not because he wanted to torture them. Not even because of his father, though. That history was there, heavy as old rain. He said no because by then he'd read the full traffic package. And buried inside, it was something ugly. The bank's preferred design would close the informal service lane used by 5 longtime small businesses behind the old mill site. An auto glass shop. A print supply store. A family-owned upholstery warehouse. A plumbing wholesaler. And a woman named Mrs. Fenley, who ran a bakery out of a brick building older than half the council. Those businesses weren't glamorous, but they employed people. Local people. And once the development went up, they'd be squeezed behind loading docks with no practical access for trucks. Ben knew 2 of the owners. He fixed rooftop units for one of them. So now this wasn't just about the money. It was about whether Commonwealth got to call something revitalization while quietly choking out the people already there. At the next meeting, Warren came in expecting another price fight. Instead, Ben placed a single marked-up site plan on the table. Red pen. A new access lane. Shared easement language. Truck turning clearance. A preserved service route. And one number written at the top. $2.4 million. Warren stared at it, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes people laugh when they realize control has left the building. You cannot be serious. Ben looked at him. I am. That's extortion. No, Patricia said softly, without looking up from her notes. It's a refusal to subsidize your project. Warren leaned back hard. $2.4 million for a strip of broken pavement? Ben said, for frontage, utility path, storm line, schedule recovery, investor confidence, and a design that doesn't box out half the block. The room went still. He'd named the real inventory. Not land. Consequences. That meeting ended badly. Warren left first. Fast. A chair leg barked against the floor. The attorneys gathered papers too carefully, which is how professionals show anger. Outside, Ben stood on the sidewalk, while traffic moved past in little bursts. Patricia stepped beside him and asked, "You ready if they call your bluff?" Ben looked across the street at a crew replacing old curb ramps. Orange vests. Concrete dust. Normal work. Then he said, "It's not a bluff." She nodded once. That was enough. For the next 6 weeks, Commonwealth tried to go around him. They commissioned redesign options. One came in at an additional $3.1 million. Another created a fire access issue. Another triggered drainage problems that would require state review. One consultant suggested acquiring 2 more adjacent slivers from other owners and stitching together a new route. That owner wanted 9 months just to consider. Time kept passing, and money kept burning. Then the local paper got hold of the story. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. Tiny parcel holds up, Commonwealth Square. Suddenly everybody knew. The weed patch had a number attached to it now. 8,000. And the project behind it had a number too. 30 million. That contrast did what numbers always do. It made the story feel unfair. Just not in the direction the bank wanted. People remembered the foreclosures, the branch closures, the way Commonwealth talked about community when cameras were on and fees when cameras were off. Public sympathy started bending toward Ben. Not completely, but enough. Then came the council hearing. That was the night the power really shifted. The chamber was fuller than usual. Developers, business owners, curious locals, a TV camera from the regional station. Commonwealth presented first. They talked jobs, tax revenue, urban renewal, future growth. All the right phrases. Then council opened public comment. Mrs. Fenley spoke. Small voice. Steady hands. She said she'd run her bakery on the block for 27 years. She said she wasn't against progress. She said she was against disappearing. Then 2 other business owners spoke. Then Patricia. Then finally Ben. He wasn't dramatic. That's why people listened. He stepped to the mic with a folded page in one hand and said, "I bought parcel 17B legally. I paid taxes on it. I refused several offers. That part is true, but this isn't only about price." He laid the marked up site plan on the lectern. This project, as designed, helps one part of downtown by cutting off another. They call my land useless, but they built their entire entrance, storm line, and schedule around it. If it's that essential, then they should pay for it honestly and build in a way that doesn't erase the people already here. He paused. Not long. Just enough. Then added, a good project shouldn't need somebody else to lose quietly. You could feel the room move. Not loudly. Just a subtle shift. The kind that happens when a sentence lands on something people already suspected. Warren spoke after him, but the room had changed. He sounded polished. Bennett sounded true. And polished usually loses that fight. 3 days later, Commonwealth called again. No consultants. No intermediaries. Warren himself. His voice was flatter now. What would close this? Ben said, the number you already have, and recorded access protections for the rear businesses. You know that's outrageous. Ben looked at the rain streaking his shop window. No, it's expensive. Outrageous is laughing at somebody and then pretending you don't need him. There was a long silence on the line. Then Warren asked, quietly this time, did you buy it because of us? Ben thought about that. About his father. About the tackle shop. About the auction room laughter. About Mrs. Fenley's hands at the podium. And he said the most honest thing he could. I bought it because you didn't understand what you were looking at. That was it. No speech. No revenge monologue. Just a fact. The final agreement took 12 more days. Commonwealth paid $2.4 million for Parcel 17B. They also recorded a permanent shared access easement protecting the rear businesses. They adjusted the site plan. Not because they wanted to. Because they had to. At closing, Ben wore the same brown work boots he'd worn to the auction. The bank sent outside counsel. Not Warren. Probably wise. The papers were thick. The signatures clean. Wire instructions confirmed. Patricia glanced over and said, "You all right?" Ben gave a small shrug. Yeah. But he didn't look triumphant. That's important. Because moments like this don't feel the way people imagine. They don't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes they feel quiet. Heavy. Like finishing something you've been carrying longer than you realized. After fees and taxes, Ben didn't become some mansion-buying legend. He paid off his mortgage, set money aside for his niece's college, bought newer equipment for his business, replaced the Tacoma, though not with anything flashy. A 2-year-old truck. Gray. Practical. He invested some, gave some away privately. And once a month, he still drank bad gas station coffee before early service calls. Because habits built over decades don't disappear just because your balance changes. As for Commonwealth Square, the project eventually got built. Smaller entrance. Different drainage route. Slightly less elegant than the original renderings. Still profitable. Just not on the terms the bank expected. And that might be the most satisfying part of the whole story. Ben didn't destroy the project. He corrected it. He forced powerful people to admit that small and unimportant are not the same thing. That laughter is not leverage. That paperwork can remember what arrogance forgets. A few months after construction started, Ben drove past the site on his way back from a rooftop repair. He stopped at the light on Ransom. Workers were moving rebar near the new entrance. Traffic was backed up. A concrete truck idled at the curb. And right there, under new grading and orange fencing, was the line where Parcel 17B used to be. Just a strip. Still narrow. Still ordinary looking. No monument. No sign. Nothing to tell a stranger that a whole bank had choked on that patch of ground. Ben looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. Then the light changed. And he drove on. That's usually how real power looks when it's done. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just settled. Like a bill finally paid. And maybe that's why this story sticks. Because on the surface, it's about land. About frontage. Permits. Lawyers. Money. But underneath, it's about something most people understand immediately. The humiliation of being dismissed. The cold little smile from somebody who thinks your size is your limit. The room that laughs before it knows the ending. We remember those moments. All of us do. And most of the time, nothing comes of them. You go home. You swallow it. Life moves on. But once in a while, the person everyone overlooked turns out to be standing in the one place nobody can bypass. And when that happens, the power in the room changes so fast, it almost feels unfair. Almost, but not quite. Because Ben didn't steal anything. He didn't cheat. He didn't bluff with empty hands. He studied. He waited. He held his ground. And when the people who laughed finally came back, they didn't come back with jokes. They came back with a checkbook. So the next time somebody calls a thing worthless, a person, a small opportunity, a narrow corner, a quiet voice, remember Parcel 17B. Remember that the world is full of assets disguised as leftovers. And the people who miss them are usually the same people who think they can afford to laugh until they can't. Final line. They laughed at his $8,000 bid because they thought they were looking at a weed patch shop. What they were really looking at was the price of underestimating the wrong man. And here's what I want to know from you. If you were Ben, would you have taken the first 6-figure offer or held out until the bank changed the whole deal?